Revenge with Karen.
I knew something was off the second I walked into that meeting, and my calendar had mysteriously cleared itself. No pings, no reminders, just a single line at 9 o'clock a.m. Check-in W/Rachel HR joining. That's not a check-in. That's a guillotine appointment wrapped in corporate frosting. I shut the door behind me, looked at the empty chairs, and realized they weren't late. I was early, and not by accident. Let's rewind before this powder keg went kaboom. 12 years. That's how long I gave them. I helped build Pinnacle Systems out of a shared office space with water-stained ceiling tiles and a microwave that once caught fire because someone tried to heat up an Egg McMuffin in the wrapper. I still remember the night I pushed the first line of production code at 3:27 a.m. with greasy hair and a half-dead laptop battery. We had no funding, no UI, no plan B, just stubbornness and too much Red Bull. We built a platform that scaled faster than our headcount. And me? I was the one duct taping the back end with every patch and sanity-saving commit. They called me the brain back then. Emma, the silent engine. Emma, who never missed a deadline. Emma, who was too valuable to replace. Funny how too valuable becomes too difficult once the CEO's daughter decides she wants to be seen as the visionary. Oh, before I forget, if you're enjoying this mess of corporate backstabbing and poetic justice, hit that subscribe button and like the story. Seriously, 95% of y'all don't subscribe, and it's the only thing that keeps our sanity intact while diving into these office train wrecks. It tells us we're not yelling into a void. Much appreciated. Anyway, fast forward to last quarter. I'm still running point on system architecture, but the invites to leadership syncs start disappearing. One week it must have been a mistake. The next it's we're trying to streamline meetings. Suddenly, I'm not on product briefings, not looped in on roadmap updates. My Slack messages are all thumbs-up emojis and radio silence. I didn't need a whiteboard to see the writing on the wall. Rachel, the founder's daughter, had officially taken the reins. 34, Stanford MBA, never written a line of code in her life, but had feelings about user journeys and liked to say things like data is the new oil in every town hall. I didn't hate her. At first, she was energetic, confident, and wore high heels that could probably murder someone. But slowly, her energy started replacing our experience. Longtime team leads were being swapped for LinkedIn darlings with TikTok resumes. Culture shifted from get it done to get a vibe. I wasn't part of the vibe. I played along. I didn't push. I didn't protest when Rachel brought in her old roommate as VP of Vision Alignment. I didn't roll my eyes in meetings. I just kept doing what I've always done, solving the impossible with duct tape and logic. Then came the company rebrand. New logos, new motto, Power the Pinnacle, and a suddenly very public push to highlight fresh voices, as who wasn't asked to write the engineering blog anymore. I became the ghost in the machine, still fixing things, still being called when production broke at 2 a.m., but otherwise invisible. Until the HR calendar invite showed up. And here's the kicker. The night before that meeting, I found myself pulling open a folder on my drive I hadn't touched in a decade. Founding Documents 2011. Buried deep in my personal cloud archive, beneath layers of old cap table spreadsheets, incorporation letters, and IP assignments. Something about the silence around me, the way I'd been erased without even being confronted, stirred a low hum in the back of my skull. I remembered a clause, a weird one. Back when the lawyers were still green and we all thought equity was magic beans. I didn't even open the document that night, just stared at the file name for a while. Then I bookmarked it. I didn't know yet why my gut told me to keep that close. But it did. And my gut, it's never wrong. Rachel strutted into the glass fishbowl conference room like she was auditioning for a reality show, reboot, called Corporate Coop Queens. She had that smug glow only two types of people get: folks who just won an argument with their mother-in-law, and people about to do something incredibly stupid with absolute confidence. Heels clicked like a countdown as she crossed the room, not even looking at me until she sat. Behind her, a jittery HR rep named Callie fumbled with a stapled packet, eyes darting like she was trying to locate the fire exits in case I lunged. I didn't. I just sat, back straight, hands folded, like I'd been through this dance before, because I had, but never with such obvious theater. Rachel cleared her throat and said, "Emma, thanks for making the time. Wanted to say, you scheduled this over my team's stand-up, So no, I didn't make time, you stole it, but I nodded. We've been reviewing team feedback and overall culture alignment. She began, using that performative tone you get when someone rehearses in front of a mirror, but forgets they're talking to a human being. I tilted my head slightly. Culture alignment. She smiled like she'd been waiting for that cue. There have been consistent concerns about your adaptability, specifically your reluctance to embrace our new methodologies, your tone in team forums, and an overall resistance to collaborative evolution. Translation: you didn't kiss enough ass in Slack, and you called out my bestie's idiotic sprint board idea last month. Callie the HR squirrel perked up and added, and we want to foster a psychologically safe environment where all voices feel heard. I glanced at her and wondered if that included mine. Apparently not. Rachel slid a manila envelope across the table like she was serving divorce papers in a courtroom drama. This is your formal exit package. Termination is effective today. I looked down at the envelope. No severance negotiation. No heads up. Just a clean, cold break. That meant this wasn't reactive. This was planned, premeditated. The room suddenly reeked of vanilla perfume and cowardice. Rachel grinned wider. I know this is a lot to take in. We really appreciate your past contributions. Truly. I could have laughed if it wouldn't have chipped a tooth. Instead, I looked her square in the eye, picked up the envelope, tucked it neatly into my bag, and said, I'll pack my awards. No tears, no begging. No grand speeches about loyalty or legacy or blood, sweat, and broken keyboards. Just calm, controlled. Rachel blinked like she didn't quite get the cinematic climax she was hoping for. Callie opened her mouth, probably to offer some HR-scented platitude about transition support, but I was already standing. I walked out, through the bullpen, past the engineers pretending not to notice, past the product folks who used to depend on me but now stared at their screens like maybe if they didn't look, it wasn't happening. One guy, David, from infrastructure, looked up and mouthed, "What the hell?" I just nodded once. Back at my desk, I opened the drawer and started packing. Not frantically, not performatively, just methodically. 2 glass awards for Architect of the Year, a framed photo of the founding team at our series a party, and a worn stress ball shaped like a server rack. I left the cheap company mug and the branded notebook. Didn't feel like feeding the vulture souvenirs. Then, I did something that, at the time, probably looked like absent-minded forgetfulness. I placed my badge on the desk, and beside it, I laid a slim black folder. No label, no logo, just matte black with a slightly frayed edge. I didn't say a word, didn't make a scene. I walked out of Pinnacle Systems for what they assumed was the last time. No tears, no tantrums, no resistance. Just a woman who knew where all the bones were buried and had kept the receipts. Emma's out. That was the message. 3 little words that hit Slack like a lit cigarette dropped in a puddle of gasoline. Could almost hear the digital popcorn popping in every open tab. Channels lit up like Christmas in a meth lab. The hash general thread went quiet, but the DMs turned into Vegas at midnight. Flashing, buzzing, everyone suddenly very, very interested in what just happened. Some folks reacted fast, the ones who owed Rachel favors or wanted to be on the right side of her LinkedIn glow-up. Wishing Emma the best in her future endeavors. One posted with a smiley face emoji, so forced it practically screamed, "Please, don't fire me next." A few engineers added crying emojis. One posted a single broken heart. But the real conversation was happening elsewhere, in the locked channels, in backroom side chats, in private Zooms that no one would admit were happening. The whispers weren't about me being gone. They were about how fast and quiet it had been. No announcement. No town hall. No thank you to one of our co-founders. Just gone, like I'd never existed. Rachel, of course, wasn't about to let the silence speak. Mid-afternoon, she jumped on an all-hands call that wasn't on anyone's calendar an hour prior. Her camera was perfectly angled, and her background screamed we're crushing it. Soft lighting, a plant she probably hadn't watered once, and a shelf lined with unread strategy books. She smiled like a cat who'd just eaten the neighbor's parrot. "Hi, everyone," she chirped. Just wanted to take a moment to share some exciting updates. Exciting. That word always means someone's about to get screwed. As part of our continued leadership realignment, she said, pausing just long enough to let that term settle like a fart in an elevator, we've made the difficult decision to part ways with Emma, our former VP of architecture. Former VP. Like I hadn't been part of the team before there was a team. Thank her for her past work, she went on, already scanning notes for the next line. But to move forward with our innovation roadmap, we need leadership that's agile, aligned, and collaborative. Dead weight slows down velocity. And there it was. Dead weight. She didn't say it directly, but she didn't have to. It was in the tone. The twitch of her eye when she said agile. The smug little smirk when she used velocity like it was a weapon instead of a measure of progress. I watched the recording later. My phone buzzed with a notification about it before I even made it to the parking garage. And by the time I sat behind the wheel of my 2015 Honda, the one I never upgraded because I was too busy pouring my equity into Pinnacle, I'd seen enough. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't even flinch. I opened my laptop on the passenger seat, propped it against an old hoodie, and tethered it to my phone. Took 11 seconds to boot. Another 6 to find the file. Article 7. PDF, there it was. The obscure clause from our original shareholder agreement, drafted back when we were all still idealistic, caffeinated, and naive enough to think equity was loyalty in printed form. A clause that had been revised, redlined, and minimized in every round since, but never deleted. Because no one thought they'd need to. No one except me. It stated, plain enough language, that the founding technical officer, defined explicitly by name and date of original code contribution, could not be involuntarily terminated without unanimous consent from all registered investors. Not just the board, not just the CEO, all investors, and if that consent wasn't granted, immediate reversion of all core IP authorizations. Hostile transfer trigger. Legal and fiduciary breach. Basically, if you screw me without permission, I get to burn the ship down legally. I clicked compose on my email client and typed one line to my attorney of 10 years, a woman who once told a judge that ignorance of buried clauses is not a defense, it's a career-ending choice. Subject: Activate Article 7. Attached: the PDF, my original IP assignment agreement, and a timestamped screenshot of Rachel's internal announcement, smiling like the executioner at a LinkedIn photo shoot. I hit send. Then I shut the laptop, leaned back in the driver's seat, and stared out at the gray Ohio sky like it owed me something. This wasn't over. It hadn't even started. Rachel wasted no time. Less than 72 hours after my departure, she was on a stage in San Francisco with the founder's smile and none of his caution, announcing that Pinnacle Systems was entering final negotiations for acquisition by Vorta Technologies, a monstrous data consolidation conglomerate with a habit of swallowing startups and bleeding their IP like oranges at a juice bar. $220 million. That was the number being whispered in investor circles, blasted in press leaks, and hinted at in breathless Slack messages between employees wondering what their stock options might finally be worth. I knew it wasn't about the money for her. It was about legacy. Rachel didn't want to lead Pinnacle. She wanted to own the ending, to be the name people remembered, the one on the podium doing that fake laugh thing CEOs do when they pretend a reporter asked a hard question. But there was one tiny detail she didn't announce: due diligence. See, tech press loves to cover acquisitions like fairy tale weddings. The suits, the grins, the "we're thrilled about the future" quotes. Behind every big buyout is a team of lawyers, risk officers, and caffeine-addled interns digging through every document ever signed by the company: cap tables, vesting schedules, IP agreements, privacy disclosures, even boardroom minutes from 2011. Especially those. Which is why, 1 week after Rachel's announcement, a woman named Andrea Reyes, senior counsel for Vorta's M and a division, started making polite but increasingly pointed requests. Requests for full equity signatory archives, requests for documentation of founder exits, requests for IP origination verification. And while all that was happening, I vanished. No LinkedIn post, no Medium article titled Why I Left Pinnacle, no scorned founder rants, just silence. The kind of silence that makes people uncomfortable, that turns curiosity into dread. Rachel had expected me to post something dramatic, maybe even something desperate, but I gave them nothing. I didn't update my title, didn't reply to the emails from former teammates, didn't even cancel my company calendar. I let it run out, like a ghost account no one had the nerve to delete. I knew Rachel had eyes everywhere now, scanning for backlash, monitoring sentiment like a hawk on Red Bull. And the fact that I wasn't making a sound, that was the backlash. Because silence makes people nervous, especially when that silence used to know every root password, every licensing agreement, every customer retention model. Meanwhile, Rachel was smiling her way through pitch calls with Vorta, boasting about our scalable infrastructure, the one I designed, talking about our flexible API ecosystem, the one I patched during a holiday outage when she was still interning at an influencer branding firm. She spun my work like tinsel around a flaming Christmas tree. In the background, Andrea and her team kept digging. It started small, a request to review the 2011 shareholder agreement in full. Rachel brushed it off. "We've since updated the cap table," she told them dismissively. "Legacy docs are immaterial." Andrea asked again, this time copying the lead investor. Then came a third request, this one with a list of questions. "Can you confirm there was a formal board vote for the removal of the founding technical officer? Was investor consent documented and unanimous? Please attach proof." I knew Rachel was feeling the heat because suddenly she posted a team photo on LinkedIn. Big smiles, tagging the exec team. Caption: "Pinnacle's future is brighter than ever." A distraction, plain as day. But her hands were already shaking behind the scenes. The Investors' Council, a man named Neil Franklin, who once reduced a junior partner to tears during a Series B review, been CC'd on the last email. And when he got involved, the tone changed. Because Neil knew me, and Neil remembered Article 7. See, Neil wasn't just some suit. He'd been on the original formation call back when Pinnacle was 5 people and a dream. He was the one who argued for a clause that protected the technical foundation in case some idiot tried to innovate out the person who actually built the system. He knew why it existed. If Rachel hadn't gotten unanimous consent to terminate me, that clause had just been triggered. But Rachel didn't know that yet. She still thought she'd won. And me? I was sitting in my kitchen with a warm cup of coffee, reading Andrea's follow-up emails forwarded from my attorney, smiling like a cat watching a mouse rearrange the furniture before a hurricane. The rope was tightening, and I wasn't even pulling. The cracks didn't explode all at once. Started as hairlines, quiet, unnoticed, insignificant if you weren't looking closely. But the thing about hairline cracks is they multiply. And when you start stacking pressure on top of them, say, the weight of a $220 million acquisition, they don't just widen, they break. It started with one email, just one, tucked inside a thread about cap table reconciliation and signatory verification. Subject line: follow-up, historical document request. From Neil Franklin, lead counsel for the majority investor in Pinnacle. To Rachel, CC'd, legal, finance, and a due diligence team. Can we get original signatory history from 2011? Prefer original PDF scans, not transcriptions. That's all he said. But the subject matter? Lethal. Rachel read it twice, eyes narrowing. First instinct was the same one most overconfident people have when confronted with legacy documentation. Ignore it. Brush it off. Redirect. She replied, "Hi Neil, we've since updated all equity structures and governance language as of Series C. Historical docs are not materially relevant to the acquisition process, but happy to confirm with our internal counsel." A non-answer dressed up like a yes. Classic Rachel. But Neil wasn't buying it, because behind that polite tone was a subtle shift. Neil never asked for cap table updates. He asked for signatory history. Originals, wet ink, founding fingerprints. Somewhere in a glassy office in Palo Alto, Rachel was still in full performance mode. She kept pushing through Vorta's due diligence, hopping on calls, reciting buzzwords, feeding them slide decks I once designed. But while she performed, someone much lower on the food chain noticed something odd. Termaya Patel, junior analyst. Smart, underpaid, terrified of making mistakes. She was combing through system access logs for an audit spreadsheet when she stumbled onto a dormant internal Git repository titled Core Foundation EM 2011 Backup v2. It hadn't been touched in years, just archived, buried beneath layers of platform updates and modern branches. But there it was. Metadata timestamped to hell and back. All the foundational IP, load balancers, routing logic, early encryption protocols, still linked to my internal author ID. Emma M, and next to that, a permissions field, foundational IP rights reserved. Maya didn't know what that meant, but she knew enough to be scared, because unlike newer repos, this one had a legal lock on it. A lock tied not to the company, but to me, the original technical owner. She flagged it to her manager. Manager flagged it to legal. Legal paused a scheduled diligence call with Vorta halfway through a PowerPoint about scalability projections. They muted the CEO mid-sentence and asked, "Wait, who authorized the termination of the founding technical officer?" Silence. Not the kind that happens when someone's thinking. The kind that happens when someone realizes they've driven off a cliff and are still in midair, waiting for gravity to catch up. Rachel blinked, smiled. I had to play it cool. We had an internal process. She signed her exit paperwork. The associate counsel on the call, a guy in his 30s who hadn't said a word the entire meeting, suddenly unmuted. Was unanimous investor consent obtained? Her expression flickered. "Excuse me, for her removal," he clarified. As outlined in Article 7 of the original shareholder agreement, the founding technical officer clause, it requires full investor consent. Unanimous. Another silence. This one was heavier, because now she knew they knew. Rachel tried to pivot. "That clause was superseded in Series C, I believe. I'll have to double-check." The lawyer didn't blink. "Please do. And send the supersession language along with the original signatory trail. We'll need both, today." She muted her mic and off-camera, threw a pen across the room hard enough to leave a mark in the drywall. Meanwhile, I was sipping chamomile tea on my porch, watching the wind twist the dead leaves into tiny whirlpools on the steps. I wasn't checking LinkedIn. I wasn't reading the Slack rumors. I wasn't writing think pieces or subtweeting about betrayal. I was doing the one thing Rachel hadn't planned for. Waiting, quietly, patiently, because you don't yank the spine out of a company and expect it to keep walking straight. Not when the spine has claws. Due diligence froze like a dead laptop at 2% battery during a thunderstorm. 1 minute, Vorta's acquisition team was firing off checklists, asking for Q2 projections, and slapping smiley faces on alignment memos. The next, everything turned ice cold. Emails went unanswered. Calendar invites vanished. Pending clarification became the phrase of the week. Corporate speak for, "Something's rotten and nobody wants to touch it without gloves and a liability waiver." And the rot, it was named Article 7, the clause that was never meant to be a problem, because in Rachel's mind, I was never meant to matter. When the request came in for clarification, not just of the clause itself, but of the decision trail leading to my termination, Rachel spun hard. She got on calls, patted hands, threw every polished sentence she had into the fire. Emma's role was largely ceremonial by the end. She hadn't been involved in technical decision-making for months. She agreed to step down. There was no resistance. No resistance. Funny how silence gets rebranded when the consequences show up. But investors don't deal in vibes and vague memories. They deal in risk. And Rachel, for all her confidence, had just dumped a live grenade into the middle of their exit strategy. Neil Franklin, the same investor counsel who'd sent the original request, called for an emergency board meeting. No emojis, no exclamation points, just urgent, board only. 4 p.m. EST. Rachel's team tried to stall. One director was on vacation in Aspen. Another had a conflict with an earnings call. Neil didn't care. He rescheduled it twice, then locked the date. Attendance required. Noncompliance will be noted, which, in investor speak, is basically a death threat. Inside the company, the mood shifted like a tide pulling out before a tsunami. The Slack bravado died down. The performative posts about new beginnings and inspiring leadership dried up. Even Callie from HR, who'd smiled like a border collie while handing me my termination packet, stopped showing up in meetings with her camera on. You could feel it, that uncomfortable quiet. The kind that follows a joke nobody laughed at, except this joke had a $220 million punchline and Rachel's signature in ink. And me, I didn't post, didn't reach out. But I did meet with 2 people. The first was my attorney, the same one I'd emailed from the parking lot. We met in a downtown office that still smelled like fresh carpet glue. She wore a gray suit and spoke in the calm, lethal tone of someone who's never lost a clause argument in her life. I handed her everything, the black folder, the old IP timestamps, a printed copy of Rachel's public statements, and a brief email chain I'd saved from 2018 where the founder had written, "As long as Emma's with us, the IP's protected." The second meeting was across town. A small cafe, back table. No laptop. Just 2 cups of burnt diner coffee and a woman named Deirdre Langston, journalist who once did a 5-part series on corporate retaliation in tech and made 3 COOs cry on record. She wasn't flashy. wore hiking boots to interviews. But she listened like her brain had hard drives in it. I didn't give her everything, just enough. I told her the story. Quietly, chronologically. No exaggerations, no hyperbole. Just the facts. Who built what, who signed what, who pretended none of it mattered until the consequences walked through the door wearing legal shoes. She listened, took notes, then said one thing before sliding her recorder back into her coat pocket. They're gonna wish you screamed. She was right, because silence is forgivable. Silence can be spun, but cold, clinical documentation backed by legal teeth and timestamp server logs, that's lethal. Back at Pinnacle, Rachel tried one more Hail Mary. She ordered the comms team to prepare a statement reaffirming leadership stability and momentum. She had the gall to start it with. Transitions are natural in innovation-driven environments. But the statement never made it past the draft phase. Because that afternoon, Neil walked into the boardroom with a printed copy of Article 7, laid it flat on the polished walnut table, and asked a single question. Can anyone here show me where this clause was nullified? No one answered. Rachel looked at the paper like it had bitten her. Because that's the moment she realized the plan I never said out loud. It was unfolding, and she was already inside it. The memo wasn't supposed to leak. It was drafted behind closed doors by Pinnacle's external legal team, marked confidential in bold, double-underlined legal font, stuffed with words like exposure, breach scenario, and high-risk termination event. It was never meant for public consumption. It wasn't even sent to the full board at first. Just a select group of directors, investor reps, and one increasingly sweaty general counsel who was now rereading his own email trail with the same expression people wear when they realize they've been texting their ex from their work phone. But somehow, miraculously, mysteriously, deliciously, the memo got out. A grainy PDF, screen-grabbed and passed along via Signal, showed up on at least 3 VC group chats, 2 competitor Slack workspaces, and one particularly gossipy product manager's private Discord server. Title: Termination of Founding Technical Officer, Risk of Breach. First line: Immediate review recommended due to potentially unenforceable dismissal and violation of Article 7 Protection Clause, with implications for IP ownership and downstream compliance liability. Translation: You fired the woman who built your rocket engine while you were halfway to Mars, and now the oxygen system might belong to her. The fallout started immediately. One board member, an older man named Ted, who'd been grandfathered in from the series of days, and always looked vaguely annoyed by everything digital, stepped down without a press release or explanation. Just a resignation letter, a short email to the group, and a frantic call to his private wealth manager. Another board member, a younger, more litigation-savvy type, didn't step down. He lawyered up, fast, demanded indemnity coverage from Pinnacle for any consequences arising from misrepresented founder agreements. The CFO tried to calm him down. He responded by carbon copying the fund's risk advisor on every message moving forward. Rachel started spiraling. Her public face still smiled, LinkedIn remained cheery. The company Twitter still posted innovation, is a team sport memes, but behind closed doors, she was hemorrhaging support. Her Slack messages were getting one-word replies. The VP of Ops postponed their weekly sync 3 times in a row. Legal stopped pre-clearing her talking points. The once tightly curated palace she'd built around herself was developing hairline fractures that were starting to look suspiciously like exit wounds. Then she did what they always do when the ladder starts shaking. She tried to call me. The first time I ignored it, let it go to voicemail. The second time she used a different number, her assistant's line. I declined again. The third was a text, Emma, we need to talk. This is getting out of control. I didn't respond, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because silence was louder. It always is, especially when the one being ignored knows you're choosing not to answer. While she was busy calling and spiraling and rearranging board alliances like a drunk Jenga player, something else happened. My exit paperwork, the same packet she slid across that table with a grin 2 weeks prior, ended up in the inbox of a woman named Lorraine Wexler. Lorraine is a regulatory compliance consultant. And not just any consultant, specializes in merger audits and federal tech compliance reviews. She used to work for the FTC, where she once made an AI startup dissolve because its facial recognition model was trained on illegally acquired prison mugshots. She now consults for 3 different alphabet agencies and has a reputation for sniffing out fraud like a bloodhound that's allergic to bullshit. She received the exit paperwork in a sealed envelope. No return address. No note, just the documents. Inside, a copy of my termination packet, annotated with sticky tabs highlighting inconsistencies in procedure, missing signatures, and most notably, the absence of any investor consent documentation. She read it 3 times, then flagged it for potential regulatory escalation under the Federal Technology Assets Act. That means Pinnacle's acquisition deal could now be reviewed not just for IP conflict, but for federal compliance breach. Rachel had no idea. Yet, she was still pacing through meetings, tossing out half measures, calling in favors that were no longer being answered. Her last act of desperation, offering a posthumous tribute video to me at the next town hall. Let's celebrate Emma's contributions with a short montage. Show appreciation. The comms team refused. One of them leaked the suggestion to Deirdre Langston, the journalist I'd spoken with over coffee, who immediately tweeted, without context, too late for flowers. The grave is still warm. I didn't smile when I read it, but I did refill my tea, logged off, watched the rain bead on the window like Morse code, because the reckoning wasn't just approaching. It was already in the building, badge scanned, walking straight for her office. The boardroom was too quiet for Monday. No one shuffled papers. No one refreshed their email. Even the HVAC system seemed to be holding its breath. Rachel sat at the head of the long walnut table, flanked by her COO on one side, a guy who'd built his career on buzzwords and LinkedIn polls, and the company's general counsel, who looked like he hadn't slept since the leaked memo detonated across the investor circuit like a white-collar bomb. Neil Franklin, lead counsel for the majority investor, sat across from her with a thick binder. The binder. The one with the original shareholder agreement inside, printed on old, slightly yellowed paper that still smelled like ink and panic. His fingers were already flipping through it, page by page, like a priest preparing for an exorcism. Everyone else sat silent, watching. The only sound was the rhythmic slide of Neil's fingers over the pages, until it stopped. Page 73, Article 7. He leaned back, adjusted his glasses, and read aloud, his voice slow, deliberate, weaponized. The event of an involuntary removal of the designated founding technical officer, unanimous consent of all Series A through C investors, shall be required prior to execution of termination. Failure to obtain said consent shall result in immediate reversion of foundational intellectual property rights to said officer. He looked up. The silence bent under the weight of what he'd just said. Rachel's mouth opened slightly. She signed the exit paperwork. That implies consent. Neil's eyes narrowed, not in confusion, but in the kind of astonishment reserved for watching someone stick a fork in a toaster on purpose. She signed a termination package, Rachel, he said. That is not consent. That is compliance under false pretenses. You never brought this to the board. You never got consent. You acted unilaterally. She started to speak, but he wasn't done. He stood, placed both palms on the polished wood, and said, just triggered hostile IP reversion rights. The sentence dropped like a hammer through glass. The COO leaned back so fast his chair nearly toppled. General counsel muttered something about needing to consult notes and reached for a water bottle with hands that visibly shook. The VP of Finance looked like she was halfway through mentally updating the cap table with zero confidence she'd get it right. Rachel's face drained to the color of a stale office bagel. You're saying, she began. I'm saying, Neil cut in, that the woman you fired holds control of the core tech your entire platform runs on. And because of your negligence, that control has reverted to her legally. Then fix it, Rachel hissed. Call her, offer her more stock, write a settlement. Neil straightened. She's already spoken to legal and to press. She doesn't want a settlement. He paused, glancing at the rest of the board. She wants you gone. A murmur rippled down the table. Neil didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just pulled out a second document, a printed email chain between Emma's counsel and the acquiring company's legal team. She's offered to license the IP back to Pinnacle at her sole discretion, but only after leadership changes are formalized, including the removal of the current CEO for material breach and misrepresentation. Rachel's lips parted in disbelief. This is my company. Neil's face stayed stone cold. It was. until you torched the clause that gave you permission to sit in that chair. The board chair, a former telecom exec with a shark's eyes and a pension tied directly to this acquisition, finally spoke. How fast can we replace her? Rachel turned toward him like she'd been slapped. You're siding with her? She asked, voice shaking now. No, he replied. I'm siding with the deal, and you just became the liability. Rachel stood, fists clenched. All knew what I was trying to do. I was cleaning house, moving us forward. You were bulldozing your foundation, Neil said, and now the house is sliding into a crater. She looked at each person in the room, hoping for a nod, a glance, anything that said we've got your back. But all she got were lowered eyes and tight jaws. She reached for the binder. Neil put his hand on it first. No more edits. No more spin. This isn't a PR problem, Rachel. It's a governance failure. Walked her out without reading the one clause that could destroy this deal. And just like that, the woman who had fired me with a smirk and a manila envelope realized she wasn't leading the company anymore. She was getting fired by it, by her own hubris, by the ghost of a clause she never bothered to read. The filing hit the wire at 7:04 a.m. East Coast time. It was brief, clinical, bloodless on the surface. Pinnacle Systems acquisition delayed due to internal IP review. No names, no explanations, just enough words to send analysts scrambling and PR teams fumbling for talking points. By 8 o'clock, 3 tech blogs had picked it up. By 8:15, shares in Vorta Technologies dipped 4 points. By 8:20, one former Pinnacle engineer tweeted, "Internal IP review equals someone fed around and found out." Inside Pinnacle's HQ, panic moved fast. The board issued an emergency statement about leadership transitions and realigning strategic goals. Rachel was placed on administrative leave pending legal review. They didn't even give her the courtesy of a press quote. By lunch, her badge was deactivated. By 2:00 p.m., she was escorted out, not with a manila envelope and a smile, but with 2 HR reps and a box of belongings she didn't pack herself. Her office plants were left behind. Her CEO of Tomorrow award was shoved under someone's arm like a broken umbrella. Meanwhile, across town, I was sitting in my kitchen with black coffee and a half-toasted bagel. The house was quiet. No celebration, no champagne, just the subtle, steady satisfaction of gravity working in my favor. My inbox dinged. One new message. Subject, request to reopen negotiations. Pinnacle Systems licensing framework. I opened it slowly, even though I already knew what it would say. Dear Emma, in light of recent developments, and to ensure the continued functionality of the Pinnacle platform, we would like to formally request a meeting to renegotiate terms regarding the licensing of your intellectual property. It went on. Polite. Apologetic, drenched in phrases like value-aligned solutions and expedited framework proposals. It ended with, please let us know how you'd prefer to proceed. I stared at the blinking cursor, 1 beat, 2, then I typed, pack your awards, hit send. Closed the laptop. I didn't dance, didn't clap, didn't even smile. Triumph doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes with the slow pour of fresh coffee, the morning sun slanting across your kitchen floor, the knowledge that the empire they tried to steal from you is now back in your hands, only more valuable than ever. Another email landed 20 minutes later. This one from Vorta. Their revised offer, 3x my original stake. No strings, full licensing authority. Advisory role optional. On screen, a digital signature line glowing like a jackpot. I didn't rush to sign. I let the silence breathe a little longer, because after 12 years of building the backbone while they smiled for the cameras, it felt good to be the ghost they couldn't bury. The one with the receipts, the rights, and all the time in the world. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.